Vale-me Deus, é o fim do nosso amor. Perdoa, por favor. Eu sei que o erro aconteceu, mas não sei o que fez tudo mudar de vez. Onde foi que eu errei? Eu só sei que amei, eu amei, que amei. Será talvez que a minha ilusão foi dar meu coração com toda a força pra essa moça me fazer feliz, e o destino não quis me ver como raiz de uma flor de lis, e foi assim que eu vi nosso amor na poeira, poeira, morto na beleza fria de Maria, e o meu jardim da vida ressecou, morreu no pé que brotou Maria, nem Margarida nasceu, e o meu jardim da vida ressecou, morreu do pé que brotou Maria, nem Margarida nasceu. Vale-me Deus, é o fim do nosso amor. Obrigada, perdoa, por favor. Eu sei que o erro aconteceu, mas não sei o que fez tudo mudar de vez. Onde foi que eu errei? Eu só sei que amei, que amei, que amei, que amei. Será talvez que a minha ilusão foi dar meu coração com toda a força pra essa moça me fazer feliz, e o destino não quis me ver como raiz de uma flor de lis, e foi assim que eu vi nosso amor na poeira, poeira, morto na beleza fria de Maria, e o meu jardim da vida ressecou, morreu no pé que brotou Maria, nem Margarida nasceu, e o meu jardim da vida ressecou, morreu no pé que brotou Maria, nem Margarida nasceu, no pé que brotou Maria, nem Margarida nasceu, no pé que brotou Maria, nem Margarida nasceu.
Essa é a nossa última música, então um bom evento para todos. Eu sou a Jo Nunes, esse é o Jonas Lopes. É pau, é pedra, é o fim do caminho, é um resto de toco, é um pouco sozinho, é um caco de vidro, é a vida, é o sol, é a noite, é a morte, é o laço, é o anzol, é peroba no campo, é um nó na madeira, cainga, candeia, é uma tita pereira, é madeira de vento, tombo da ribanceira, mistério profundo, é um queira ou não queira, é o vento ventando, é o fim da ladeira, é a viga, é o vão, festa da cumieira, é a chuva chovendo, é conversa ribeira das águas de março, é o fim da canseira, é o pé, é o chão, é a marcha estradeira, passarinho na mão, pedra de atiradeira, é uma ave no céu, uma ave no chão, é o regato, é uma fonte, ponte, é um pedaço de pão, é o fundo do poço, é o fim do caminho, é o resto do desgosto, é um pouco sozinho, é um esteco, é um treco, é uma conta, é um conto, é um pingo pingando, é uma conta, é um conto, é um peixe, é um gesto, é uma prata brilhando, é a luz da manhã, é o tijolo chegando, é a lenha, é o dia, é o fim da picada, é a garrafa de cano, estilhaço na estrada, é o projeto da casa, é o corpo na cama, é o carro enguiçado, é a lama, é a lama, é um passo, é uma ponte, é um sapo, é uma rã, é um resto de mato na luz da manhã, são as águas de março fechando o verão, é promessa de vida no teu coração. Uma cobra é um pau, João é José, é um espinho na mão, é um corte no pé, são as águas de março fechando o verão, é promessa de vida no teu coração, é pau, é pedra, é o fim do caminho, é o resto de toco, é um pouco sozinho, é um passo, é uma ponte, é um sapo, é uma rã, é um belo horizonte, é uma febre terçã, são as águas de março fechando o verão, é promessa de vida no teu coração. Pau, pedra, inho, esta, oco, inho, arco, hidra, vida, ó, oite, arte, aço, zol, são as águas de março fechando o verão, é promessa de vida no teu coração. Parabapá, parabapá, tararada, as águas de março fechando o verão, é promessa de vida no teu coração. Bom dia para todos. Muito obrigada.
Bom dia, bom dia, bom dia. Como é que é, pessoal? Bom dia. Ótimo. Sejam todos muito bem-vindos. Mais uma vez nos reunimos e agora nós do Imap estamos no movimento, no nosso programa de Colabora Curitiba, Colabora.cwb. Nós vamos nos familiarizando, né, com as atividades. Nós fizemos essa semana o Ação. Quem participou do Ação na terça-feira? Foi bom? Bacana. Aí que vai dizer que não, né? Agradecer muito aos músicos, a Jo e o Jonas, Jo e Jo. Agradecer muito a vocês, agradecendo a eles pelo também o ICAC, o Instituto Curitiba Arte e Cultura, que está nos proporcionando a vinda dos músicos para fazer estas boas-vindas. Dentro da nossa proposta do programa Colabora Curitiba, nós estamos hoje nesta etapa que foi sonhada enquanto a gente fazia o processo de contratação da empresa que é a Colabsou, pela possibilidade da vinda deste consultor, desse especialista em governança colaborativa, que é o Robert Sayles. Ele está aqui porque ele estava ali, no México, e tão pertinho daqui, ele aproveitou, né? Deu uma descidinha aqui até o Brasil, e estamos aqui com ele, graças ao apoio de instituições que o trouxeram para nós aqui. Então, com muita honra, com muita gratidão, eu peço que o Robert Sayles venha comigo aqui no palco. E eu peço uma salva de palmas para ele. Esse momento, ele é um momento assim, tipo cometa, né? Aconteceu uma palestra com ele, que nós vamos apreciar daqui a pouquinho. E eu vou chamar para compor comigo aqui esse palco a Michele Taminato, que é uma das líderes da empresa Colabsou, que está nos apoiando neste processo do Colabora Curitiba, Colabora.cwb. Eu sei que a agenda de vocês é sempre muito selvagem, então eu agradeço muito a participação de vocês aqui hoje, bem como eu agradeço muito o empenho que vocês estarão colocando no nosso trabalho no Colabora Curitiba. Então, pessoal, muito obrigado. Muito obrigado aos secretários, temos aqui a Dani, nossa secretária de Gestão de Pessoas, a Juscelane, que é do IPMC, a Ana, que é do IPUC, a nossa procuradora-geral, a Vanessa Volpe, que prestigiam conosco aqui o evento. Agradeço aos secretários e presidentes por vocês estarem aqui também. E, naturalmente, eu agradeço ao nosso prefeito, Eduardo Pimentel, que acredita nesse movimento que nós estamos fazendo. Então, sem muitas delongas, podemos... Não sei se vai... Are you going to stay stand or sitting? Combination of standing and... Ok. Então, podemos dar... Peraí, Michele, você quer dar umas boas-vindas? Michele.
Boas-vindas, ok. Gente, bom dia a todos, a todas. É uma honra estar aqui. Grata, Bia, pela oportunidade, pela participação de todos vocês, pela vontade da gente fazer juntos e continuar esse projeto tão maravilhoso que é o Colabora Curitiba. É uma honra estar trazendo o Robert para o Brasil. É a primeira vez dele aqui. E aí estavam me perguntando, né, para onde mais ele vai? Para nenhum outro lugar. Então, a gente tem que trazer para ele a melhor energia possível para registrar o que é ser brasileiro e ele poder ficar com essa vontade de voltar e conhecer mais coisa, mas tendo a nossa capital como referência no coração dele, para que ele possa voltar e promover a nossa Curitiba também lá na Austrália e todos os lugares que eles passam. Então, que vocês possam aproveitar. É uma honra trazer um dos meus grandes professores aqui para a nossa cidade, para a nossa casa, para poder compartilhar um pouquinho dessa sabedoria que, com muita humildade, com um coração de ser humano para ser humano, ele tem encantado governantes e pessoas no mundo inteiro. E é uma honra ele poder estar aqui com a gente nesse momento. Grata, Bia, ao Imap, que está fazendo essa organização incrível. E dou as boas-vindas a você, Robert. Welcome, welcome. And now I pass to you.
Thank you very much for your very warm welcome. It's a delight to be here. And I hope that our time now, during our next hour and a half, I can share something that's of value to you. I mean, I really appreciate that the work you're doing is extraordinarily important, collaboration, but in a real sense, it's bringing the hearts and minds of people together so that we can more effectively look after each other and this dear planet that we live on. And Michelle, you were saying before that you've brought me here and that you hope that I want to stay. I already do. Yeah. I had a delight of... It's the Latin American spirit, I think. It's seduced me. Anyway, I've had the wonderful opportunity of spending the morning with Anna yesterday, and Bia has showed me around town and given me a history of Curitiba and what you're doing. And believe me, it's just wonderful. I mean, I've been privileged enough to travel around the world and work in most countries. And this is a standout already, only in 2 days. So it's just beautiful. I sat down this morning at breakfast and I started wondering, how are we going to spend this morning together? And I started taking some notes. I jotted down some key ideas, and right from the outset, I want to let you know that I don't have any answers. All I have got are some experiences that I'd like to share with you, some experiences that have taught me something about what it means for us to be more human and more humane and to work together in the presence of the climate of our times. And I think everybody here would agree that there's a lot of work to do on that front. At the Australian National University, where I was a professor for years, I had the privilege of working with climate scientists as I engaged with different countries in the Pacific and Africa and Asia in order to tackle climate-related issues, and the forecasts are not good. And then on top of that, there's the broader geopolitical environment and everything else that goes with it. And we get it's kind of this never-ending reel of bad news, don't we? So there's no reason for me to spend any more time than this right now to repeat that. We all know it very well, don't we? I need a yes. Yeah. But the big question is, how do we respond, How do we respond? I'd like to give you a little bit of a snapshot into the work that I've done, and I've prepared a suite of slides here, and I'm not going to show you them all, that's for sure. I'm just going to show you a few. So I put together this little vignette before I came over here, not only to share it with you, but also I was just up in Mexico at the Worldwide Meeting on Human Values. I was one of the keynote speakers and did a workshop. And Providence has had me working in all these countries, Africa, Asia, China, Latin America, with Michelle and Marcelo and Collab Sol, Pacific, Australia, of course, Vietnam and Mexico. And all of these programs of work were supported by the Australian government as part of their sort of bilateral relation initiative and aid programs. They invested a huge amount of money in trying to improve things like the health of our oceans and fisheries, clean energy consumption, but particularly a lot of focus on public sector leadership. And so as I worked with all of these extraordinary people, I tried to capture photos to just kind of give you a sense. There were a few things that were very unique to all of these extraordinary people, extraordinary leaders who rose to the kind of challenge that we are in beautiful ways. And there were common characteristics. So I just want to share some of the things that I observed that all of these extraordinary people engaged in, and that I can also sense that you are. And as I share this, what I've kind of realised as a behavioural scientist and a keen student in human nature is that what I've learned is not new. It's actually something we all know, really. We've just got to remind ourselves of it. And the first thing I'd like to flick to, actually, is a topic that we covered in... so excuse me, I'm going to flick around slides just to find the ones that I want to speak to. So when I was in Mexico, this was the topic of my talk. It was about radical compassion. And this list here is this is a behavioural definition of radical compassion. And I think this is at the heart of it. Everyone I've worked with are extraordinarily compassionate. But what does that actually mean? Because it's a lovely word, isn't it? But what does it actually mean when we show up and we have that quality of presence? And I think you have that. We've all met people that, like when they walk in the room, they kind of just lift your spirit. You know what I mean? And occasionally I'll need a yes from you, so you know what I'm talking. Yeah. And so I noticed that myself. I mean, there are occasions when I was sitting around with my friends and slouching back, and someone would walk into the room and suddenly go, "Oh, who's this person?" And they were compassionate. So I just want to very quickly speak to these facets of radical compassion, as at least as they're understood in the behavioural sciences, which is my camp. So the first thing is a distinction between compassion and empathy. You know what empathy is? Yeah. Well, for me, it's there's two facets to empathy. And one is to do with the head and the other one's to do with the heart. And so if you empathise with someone, you appreciate what they think about things, their worldview. But also you appreciate how they feel about things and what it is they really value. But also what they're passionate about, but also what they're concerned about. So it's a combination of understanding their worldview and appreciating it, but also how they feel about it. And so in this framework, you cannot respond with real compassion unless you actually empathise with the other person. And empathy, it's when you really get them, you know. Like a lot of people will politely respond to someone and just say, "Yes, I hear what you're saying," and they'll repeat it back, and it's kind of very formulaic, Do you know what I mean? And you kind of know that they really don't understand where I'm coming from. Yeah, I can see nods. Here's another time where I need a yes. Yeah. And that experience, it's like me seeking it from you now. It's like this experience where if you're with someone and you just go, now I understand where you're coming from. And you kind of feel it with your whole being. Now I understand where you're coming from. And what you care about. And what you as a sentient human being need in order to actually be healthier or happier. It's a very human connection. And so that's the prelude to compassion. So once you've actually got them, then there's an opportunity to respond. So the first part is non-contingent compassion. So that means that when you're acting in the service of someone else's well-being or to alleviate their suffering, it's a gift. It is not contingent on them giving something back to you. Like there's no transaction in it. Like if you're doing something, you don't think, well, I'll only do this if you actually lift your game or give me something back. It's a genuine act of love and generosity to the other person. So that's the first thing. Your act is purely from the heart. And it's an act in the service of the life and the well-being of the other person you're with, or the community, or the team. The next facet is positive reinforcement. I was talking to Anna about this yesterday and others. It's when you acknowledge what you genuinely admire in others. And you cannot fake admiration, can you? It's like looking at this beautiful park out here. I walked in, Bea drove me in, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. Like that, wow, this is amazing. I didn't make that up. So acknowledgement is acknowledging what you genuinely admire. It's not praise, which is kind of transactional. It's when you see something that you genuinely admire in others, and you go, I love the way in which you do that. But at an institutional level, how do we actually see and notice what it is we admire about other teams or other divisions within the government or our citizens and the communities? And how can we genuinely acknowledge what it is we truly admire about what they're doing? So genuine admiration. So it's what I've noticed is in just about every culture that I've had the privilege of working in, institutions that I've worked with, the ratio of genuine acknowledgements to criticisms is the wrong way around. It's been shown in my research and others that if you want people to receive feedback constructively and genuinely welcome it, say, oh, wow, thanks for pointing that out, you have to acknowledge what you admire in them 5 times more than you provide feedback. If it's any less than 5 times by average, then the feedback will be received as a criticism and they'll become defensive. So that act alone could already change the culture of our institutions. It's very powerful. And what's the ratio? Who thinks that criticism trumps admiration in your public sector? You're allowed to tell the truth in here. Who feels and this could be a telling moment. I mean, what is the ratio? Do we spend more time, even when we're having a cup of coffee or a casual conversation about what's going on within our team and our work? Do you spend more time complaining about what's going on or actually talking about what you truly admire? So who talks more about what they admire? Hands up. Yeah. Who would agree that criticism of the citizens, our efforts are criticised more than they are celebrated? Yeah, exactly. And who feels like, and it's them who've got to change because they don't appreciate what I'm doing? Yeah, often exactly. Well, do you know, you can change it by actually going out and deliberately choosing to acknowledge what you admire. That's one of the characteristics of all the most effective leaders that I've worked with. They love what their people are doing and they let them know. So there's a challenge for you. It's like an aesthetic practice. I know when I try and do it, I need to actually bring myself, to the game. I really have to say, what is it that I admire about these people? And I don't fake it. Like there's this extraordinary woman over here that I admire. I mean, she's got a fiery Latin American spirit and a wonderful heritage. And with Marcelo, I mean, I've had the privilege of working with these two beautiful people for 3 years. And they've taught me an extraordinary amount. They've got this quality. So thank you, my dear friend. The other thing about radical compassion is that you acquire assent. So assent is a step beyond consent. When you're working with people, often you ask permission to be able to do something, don't you? And that's consent. But assent is when you're tracking their willingness to receive what you're doing live. And when you're actually trying to look after someone, it might be someone in aged care or provide a service to someone, and they say, no, they don't want you to intervene. So that's them withdrawing assent. So at that time, you don't force yourself on them. So there's no forcing them to try and do anything. But this last one is a kind of a lovely juxtaposition to that. It's about protecting the dignity of people through least restrictive practices. So people might say, no thanks, I don't need your help. But if they're acting in a way that's of danger to their own lives or others, or their own dignity as a human being, that's the time to use force protectively. And so this is a very critical distinction for our armed forces and the police and security people. If they're acting with compassion, they use force to preserve life. And it's a needed service. So this is what I was invited to speak about up in Monterey last week. And 10 minutes before I walked onto the stage, I completely changed what I was going to do because I wanted to somehow get this in the room about what it means to actually be truly present to another. And particularly point number 3, to acknowledge what you admire. And so I'd like to repeat what I did up there, if you'll do it with me, because just about everybody in the room came to me afterwards and said they cried. And I've never been in so many selfies in my life. So do you want to try the same experiment? Okay. So what I'd like you to do is, and I wonder, Bea, if you can come here in. So I'd like all of you to put your arm around the shoulder of the person next to you. Okay. Michelle? Okay. Now the next thing like I was talking before about how if you're going to genuinely acknowledge someone, you've got to kind of really see them and get them. So the next thing is I want you to turn and look into the eyes of the person next to you. But before you do it, hang on, just wait a minute. Wait. So here's, just before you do that, here's another little experiment. You can take your arm off, and we'll return. We'll come back to that in a moment, because I want to set you up for the eye-looking bit. So I'd like everybody in this room, this is another little experiment, to kind of really bring the life of this into it. So I'm going to ask all of you in a moment to close your eyes, and then I'm going to ask you to point to where you experience you being as a human being. And once you've done that, to hold the pose and then open your eyes. I'll tell you when to open your eyes, and then I want you to look around and see where everybody is pointing. So close your eyes now and then point to the middle of you, like the you. Where are you? So now point to where you are. So some of you haven't moved your hand, so point to where you experience you existing as a human being. And hold your hand there, because I'm going to ask you to open your eyes and look around to see where everybody else is pointing. Okay, so keep your hands there. Now open your eyes and look around and see where everybody's pointing. Okay. So there's... It's interesting. I have asked literally thousands and thousands of people that question from all over the world. And there's only ever 3 answers. 2 of them showed up in the room today. The first answer is, I'm in here somewhere. I'm kind of just behind my eyes in there, about 10 centimetres. Or I'm here somewhere. They're the 2 most common answers. And the third answer is something like this. So they kind of go like this. There's a movement in it. Yeah. He gets it, yeah. And so it's like I experience myself here, but I'm much more vast than that. And the trend is that when I'm in kind of academic institutions, they tend to point here. They live in their head. When I'm with compassionate communities like you, it's here. And much more rarely, those who are heavily engaged in contemplative practices, they gesture, as this gesture comes from. It's not so often. But that's where we are, isn't it? And it's the same you that was there when you were 14 years old. Right? So now we're going to go back to the experiment. And so when you look in the eyes of the person next to you, see that innocent soul that's sitting in there. You can somehow connect through the eyes. Often that's quite an emotional experience in and of itself. And I want you to hold just that gaze for maybe 5-10 seconds, and then actually say something that you admire about them. Okay? So go back to put your arms around the person next to you.
What do you need to do with her?
Yeah. Okay. Now,
Brazilian
look in the eyes of the person next to you, and then acknowledge them.
Eu já estou chorando.
Eu trouxe, eu peguei.
Eu já estou
Daí é
chorando.
bom que daí a gente divide.
É isso aí. Muito obrigada. Você é incrível.
Ai, mulher.
Que pessoa maravilhosa que passou na minha vida. Muito obrigada. Tá junto com a gente nessa jornada. Muito legal mesmo.
Te admiro muito, agradeço pela missão que você abraçou e pela foto amorosa que você deu pra gente ser juntas.
Grande. Grande.
See? Okay, so this is all the mission. If you don't say anything, they keep on saying. They're gonna keep on talking because you know how much you like to talk.
Yeah, that's all right.
What an energy. Emotion, pure emotion.
Yeah. Gente, quem está me ouvindo, bate uma palma. Quem está me ouvindo, bate 2 palmas. Bate muita palma, então, agora.
Who cried? Yeah. Yeah. This is what it should be like at our work, in our homes, with our communities. And you know, every one of us is free to choose to do that. What we just did now, what we just did, we can do that every day of our lives. But of course, in a professional sense, you know, the way in which a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or a policy maker or a gardener, or it doesn't matter, the equivalent, you know, a professional hug and actually and looking in the eyes of the others, it can be woven into the very fabric of our own practices, but also our institutions, the cultures of our teams. So that's one of the things that I've learnt from the extraordinary people that I worked with. They're on the screen before. One of the other things that I learnt was that you cannot, well, I can't, and I haven't met anyone else who's been able to do this, you can't make other people change by telling them what to do. Who's been able to change because someone else has told you you've got to change? Or who's been able to actually just, even if you've told yourself on New Year's Day that I'm going to change, and you've just suddenly changed overnight? It doesn't happen, does it? So the only way we can actually change, particularly the change the way we think, is to start experimenting with new ways to do things. And I think this is really, really obvious if we stop and think about it. When I was okay, here's an example. Who in the audience, the women, have a child? Who's got a child? Okay. So who of the women in the audience haven't had a child yet? So so there's a few here. Okay, so all the women who've had a baby, if imagine your boss doing this. Can you write a manual so that everyone who hasn't had a baby will know exactly what it's like to have a baby? You can't do it, can you? It's like when I became a dad, like I couldn't go back to the way I was before that. Yeah. Same thing, you know, it's who can ride a push bike? Yeah, or ride a horse, or, you know, cook meals beautifully. And so you cannot, yeah. So I haven't, this is the other thing that I've learnt, and I think we all know it, is that we cannot be told to change, even if you want to make that change. You've got to try new things. Like if you want to learn to ride a bike, you need to actually get on a bike and experiment until you can actually ride. And so what does that tell us about leaders who are looking after teams or trying to actually look after our communities and those that are within the context of our remit in the public service? We cannot tell them to change behaviour. It will never work. All we can do is create the conditions for them to try something new. And this is where innovation comes in. At yesterday's meeting, with, I can see this gentleman in the second row here. There was, on your team, there was someone who's responsible for sports. Yeah. And so we explored that idea. What he could do was create conditions for young people to play new games. You can create a playing field, like if you're in a school, you create conditions in your classroom, at your playground, like this park, where people can come and try new things and say, this is how I can live with the environment. Yesterday I went to the community farm and I walked around and I tasted medicinal herbs and fresh vegetables and saw bees, pollinating things and processes of composting. And as I walked in, I could see a group of school kids wandering around. And I thought, that's how you learn, by getting your hands in the dirt, And so as leaders, the best leaders that I've worked with, they created conditions, they mobilised the resources and the capabilities they've got in the service of the experiments that innovative teams wanted to actually conduct in order to learn something new. They created the playground for them to play in safely, to learn to ride a new bike. And so those leaders listened really carefully. There was something, and many of them were women, believe it or not. And this is not to pick on us gentlemen in the room, but it seems as though women have a particular sensitivity to this that men don't. I got a hunch that this is because of our history, the way in which we've been indoctrinated into compete, to compete to survive. But anyway, leaders who catalyse the most innovation, they celebrate, they overtly acknowledge what it is they admire about what their people are doing, but they also create conditions for particularly the mid-careerers who have got a real fire in their belly and they want to make a change, to be able to try new things. And the way in which they've done that has been quite unique, but very, very natural. Like I worked with the Deputy Secretary and the CEO. Well, I've worked with just about every government department in Australia, but I'm thinking of two in particular where women were in charge. And one woman, she wanted to catalyse some thinking about how can we preserve and enhance our civil liberties as human beings in the service of future generations. And it was a very evocative question. It engaged the education department and particularly school teachers and those in cultural institutions where people visited to learn about the history of democratic processes, all sorts of things. Anyway, all these teams, in these institutions come up with extraordinary ideas. But as they were incubating, she provided them with an opportunity to let them know. She let all the branch heads and everyone know that she's opening up this channel directly to her, so that other leaders lower than her in the system didn't feel like they were being jumped over. They were copied into everything, so full transparency. And of course the immediate supervisors and team leaders were involved in very appropriate ways. But Daryl Karp, her name was. I've actually got a photograph of her. This is Daryl. Extraordinary woman. She was, before she got the job where I helped her, she was a documentary maker. She worked for ABC TV, so very creative. And anyway, she would get a message from a team, I've got this idea about creating a youth leadership centre, or I've got an idea about using technology very differently in our heritage buildings in Canberra, so that young people, when they visit, can interact with it in the ways in which they love, using art and voting and sharing their ideas on particular issues related to young people. And there were so many ideas. And when someone would say, I've got an idea, she would invite them to lunch on Friday afternoon. She'd give them a beautiful meal and give them as much time as they liked to share their idea. And she would acknowledge everything that she genuinely admired about it. And then she would say, okay, have the rest of the afternoon off and go wherever you like. You don't have to stay here at work, but work your idea up. And when you're ready, come and see me next week. And if I like it, we'll make a small investment in making it work. So then she'd connect with the team leaders and others to see if it fitted with their agenda. And anyway, the museum, this is the kind of activities that occurred this is the building where Daryl worked, in the white building in the front. And behind it is Parliament House in Canberra. But anyway, these pictures are kind of like the teams, brainstorming ideas. But very natural approaches. And this was at the heart of extraordinary innovation. So that's one of the things that I wanted to share with you. I mean, I could show you just a huge number of photographs of these extraordinary people from around the world who created conditions for people to experiment. And those conditions, I want to say a little bit about those, that they were very small. They weren't big. I've met a lot of people who assume that we've got to change the whole system. If we don't, we're going to, things are not going to work. And the other thing I think we'd all acknowledge is that whole system change is just not possible. You cannot just give up your history and take on something completely new tomorrow. It's like there's the act of preserving everything you've inherited and trying little experiments to move forward in a direction that matters. And so there's a very clear sense of what it is we're trying to achieve, and there's an acknowledgement that we do not have the answers. That's the other thing, a lot of humility. We don't have the answers, otherwise we'd be going in a healthier direction. And so there was this shared understanding that we're actually on a journey of discovery, and where there were programs of participatory action, learning and research. And these leaders created conditions for these little experiments that were very low cost. And within that context, they were very clear about the critical factors that needed to be impacted at the systemic level. STEEPLES is the acronym that I use. And when I was with Anna yesterday, we were very quick to write it down. And we use this as a kind of a lens: social, technological, environmental, economic, political, legal, ethical, and spiritual. And so the leaders would spend time with their people saying, what is going on in their world and how is it working for and against them? What do they really need and what do they value that they're striving for as sentient human beings? This innocent us that's in here. And what little experiments can we do that would help them move in a healthy direction in order to impact these critical factors? And then creating conditions, the playing field for these young people to try new things within their remit. And so these were very low cost, little experiments, low amounts of investment, and they were rigorously researched. So everyone knew what it is that they wanted to impact, particularly the team themselves. I want to change the culture in my classroom. I want to change the way in which elderly are actually looked after, or street people, the people who are living on our streets, who don't have food. And so then you try little experiments, and when the impact happened, everybody knew about it. And things tip over. It's kind of like when a little team makes a big impact, everyone else goes, wow, what are you doing? What, can I try that? And then the leaders have actually gone to the effort of making sure, yep, okay. So then they mobilise resources to make sure that that can transfer to the others. And some of the innovations have just, the way in which they've evolved, are extraordinary. And I'd like to flick to another lot of photos. See, I planned none of this talk. I'm just making it up as I'm going. So I've got all these slides, and I just leap around them depending on what it is that's being called for. So this is in Fiji, this is in Africa, and I'm looking for, did you recognise that person? Yeah. I mean, some of the innovations that happen here are amazing. But anyway, I'll keep going. Vietnam, the United Nations, this chap, Thula. So years ago I was working with him. He's a Sri Lankan gentleman. He worked for a little energy utility in Sri Lanka, and he was very interested in making sure clean energy was available to everybody. He was very concerned about the environment, but he was most concerned about their social human fabric. When I was speaking to him, he was one of a cohort of about 30 people from across Southwest Asia that I worked with for a intense period of about 8 months. They all came to the ANU for a 6-week immersion program, and then I worked with them remotely for 6 months as they did these little experiments. And then I went to Southwest Asia, and I spent a week with them all as we shared our learning. And before everyone left the university in Australia, we'd spend a week together thinking about what are these little experiments we could do that within our remit that could potentially impact the most critical factors that we're dealing with. And Athula for this week, well, first of all, I said, look, what are you really interested in? What do you really care about? And he said that he was 56. He said, actually, when I retire, I'm going to become a monk. And then he started talking about how much he cared about our inner well-being and our social, spiritual fabric, at least through his worldview. But he worked with a utility, a little engineering organisation. And so he then came up with this idea to host a cooking class. So this is an example of an innovation. So he went back home and he pitched it to the board of this utility. And about 2 months later, they said, yes, you can host a cooking class. And the aim of the cooking class was to teach the consumers of their power to try and cook food more efficiently, use less power. And but really he was concerned of the whole value chain, like how food is grown, whether it's grown organically, and a bit like the community farm I went to yesterday, and whether and particularly when meal is had, breaking bread and building community and family, and then not polluting the world, recycling. And so that was what he taught, what he wanted to have in the program. And so he had a very close friend who was a journalist, and this woman, she wrote a front page article on this cooking class. And he said to me before it was hosted, I think we might have 500. They had to cut off enrolments at 2,000. And that's the audience of people and there's a celebrity chef on the stage in front of them, teaching them about how to cook food in a more energy efficient way. And the hook was that if you can demonstrably save power after you've done this course, we'll give you that as a bonus. Anyway, so they did that, and in this audience, there was people who belonged to the Scouting Association who said, this is really important. We need to teach our young people that. So his team got together with the folk in the Scouting Association And they made up a program for young people. And see on the fence down here? That's the same course that's been developed for young people. And they delivered this course in a football stadium. So you can see this stadium here. Thousands and thousands of children then learned his course. And then in this audience were teachers who said, gosh, we need to have this in our primary schools. So then they worked with the Scouting Association to fold it into their curriculum. And the following year it went from that district nationally. So he being a statistician, thought, well, I wonder what the impact was on the annual power budget for the country, and it was staggering. So he worked with a bunch of analysts around the world, and the annual saving in the year following that was $2,850 million US. And several years later, they expected to save $494 million US annually across the country. That's astounding from one cooking class, isn't it? That's astounding. And all of these vignettes in here, there's a similar story where a little experiment, like a cooking class, turned into something like the way it evolved was totally unexpected. But the leaders they were radically compassionate. They noticed and celebrated what it is that was actually working to realise the impact, and then created conditions for that to actually evolve. What, in my very Australian accent, what do you reckon? Do you think you could create like little playgrounds within your workplaces or with people in your community where you can try little experiments that could potentially make a huge difference in the long run? Who thinks that's a good idea? Yeah. Yep, that's true. And that's why we'll find the answer, because we don't have the answers. Bethula had no idea this was going to happen. One of the things that I've observed is that just about all conflict happens at the level of strategy. And it's because what someone else is doing or another team is doing is not considerate of my needs and the things that I care about. And what that indicates is that there's a deficit in listening and sensitivity to the needs of everybody who are implicated by your decisions. So this pulls for sometimes radical changes in our decision-making processes. And so first of all, a distinction between needs and values. So needs and values, from a behavioural sense, are not these reified things that we describe. Like we value safety or we value environment, and you've got to try and achieve that. Value is understood as a lived quality of experience. Like before, when we put our arms around each other's shoulders and acknowledged each other, that was an experience we value. The human, we're nourished. Like it's meeting a need and allows us to actually express value. So in a behavioural sense, needs and values are understood as the quality of a living. So our needs are natural needs for us to actually thrive as a human being, and value is what actually occurs when we're fully nourished and we're able to give our gift. That's value being given. And we've learnt to describe these. Like in my work, I draw a very big distinction between the topography of lived experience, which is actually incomprehensible, words we use to describe it. So truth is never in the words. It's in this living organism experiences. And so the question is, how useful are our descriptions of it? And what we need to learn to describe is what is actually needed and what value will emerge when the life of our planet and our fellow human beings and our animals is is nourished. The gift would be enormous. And so the challenge that we have as leaders is in this bottom statement. And it hasn't been translated, but I'll say it so you'll hear it. What if we embraced human and planetary needs as the primary organising principle? Taking a direct and insistent focus on needs can provide a blueprint for creating socio-ecological systems that nurture life. Where do we start? So great leaders put the needs and values of everybody who are implicated by a decision on the table. And if conflict ever showed up, they realised, so someone's needs are not being met. See, if we don't, like the inverse of vulnerability and complaint is actually passion and value. Like if you didn't care about something, you wouldn't complain about losing it, would you? So often we say complaint is wrong, but actually at the heart of complaint, that's just a strategy, is a human being who's wanting to actually let you know something about what they care about. So the most effective institutions are cultures of listening, not telling, but a very profound kind of listening. It's listening for the needs of the system and the value that this system could actually realise if it was healthy. And then making sure that bounded groups can act within their sphere of influence. Always bounded. So that what they do, they can actually work with everybody who's implicated by a decision. And so this is something else that I've observed universally, is the most effective leaders have been able to get really clear about the needs of life itself and to be able to respond with radical compassion in the service of those. I think we need to always be kind to children and never tell them lies. I think that's really important. And create conditions for them to be able to play safely and learn what it means to actually care for each other. This question came up in schools. I was actually asked to speak to a number of schools up in Monterey. And they're at a 5-year node where they have to reinvent their curriculum. And we can acknowledge the fact that the current curriculum in our schools is designed to have our children compete with each other. You've got to be the first in the class, and you've got to be the best looking, and you've got to be the best sports person or something. And we've created conditions. It's like, all we can do as a teacher is to create the playground for them to play a different game. And we've created a system that is enculturating our young people into a win-lose situation, where we end up exploiting the situation in order to survive and win. I think the education system needs to be completely revamped. And so the question I ask is, how can we turn our classrooms and our playgrounds into like actual playgrounds, where conditions are created for our children to see who can have the most fun looking after each other. I think there's scope for huge innovation. As I mentioned before, the importance of acknowledgement. There was a social scientist that I met probably nearly 30 years ago at the university, and she was wondering what's going on in preschools when the preschool children receive feedback, from the preschool teacher constructively rather than negatively. And this goes to the 5-to-1 praise thing. And she did a very, very interesting experience, that she actually brought in the army to see if they could make the children behave themselves in the playground. And within 10 minutes, all the children were just reduced to tears and huddled in the middle of this playground. And they just pulled them out, and the teachers came back, and within about another 20 minutes or 10, 15 minutes, they were just running around playing with each other. And they knew exactly what was in and out in terms of the boundary of the playground and what they could and can't do. So what the teachers are able to do is create the playground as well as the culture for the kids to be able to actually look after each other. And they themselves acknowledged what they loved about their children 5 times more than they offered them constructive feedback. Oh, I love the way in which you use that colour, and what a beautiful way to actually look after your friend. And oh, would you mind taking your dirty shoes? Oh, and they go, oh, sure, and they take it off. But for the teachers who didn't, they're kind of grumpy and, would you mind taking your shoes to the door? Right, and they just grumble, you know. So you think about that at a systemic level. The other thing that I was invited to do was speak to a group of university students up in Monterey who'd, one of the commissioners up there hosted a program for emerging politicians and lawyers to go through, spend 3 days experiencing all of the democratic processes. And I was the last speaker over the 3 days. And they asked a very similar question. And my response was very similar to what it is now. How can you create, because they wanted to change the system and the way in which government was operating, because they didn't trust that we're heading in a healthy direction in the service of their future well-being and the planet. And all I could say is you need to act within your sphere of influence and start acting with real kindness and compassion and experiment in new ways in order to actually do what it is, like that they were concerned about was the regime and the administration and governance. So I said, just act within your sphere of influence. We cannot judge them. All you can do is respond differently to yourselves. And I said, if you do something with the administration in the university, and your other teachers and your colleagues, that demonstrably impacts what it is that's going to preserve the well-being of future generations, others will notice. And you have to create conditions for the leaders to actually hoist that work up the flagpole. Communication is the most important role for senior leaders. And it's actually celebrating the seeds of a better tomorrow now, so that it informs policy, it inspires teammates. Yes. And so we cannot, don't get hooked by trying to fix everything that's wrong. Just start doing what is right, and it'll speak for itself. Yeah. I just want to say thank you for what you're doing. I can feel there's a vibe here that is quite unique. I mean, you saw all the countries where I've worked around the world, and you as a collective have got a very special quality of presence that I haven't felt anywhere else on this planet. So, and I want to applaud you for that. There's something you're doing already that is very right.
Que alegria, que momento gostoso, quanta inspiração, quanto refletir. E agradeço a presença de cada um de vocês. E, Robert, você é realmente uma pessoa, como a Michele nos falou, que era uma pessoa muito especial e que seria maravilhoso tê-lo aqui conosco. E eu sou muito grata por você estar aqui nessa oportunidade. Nós vamos fazer a famosa foto, então, se vocês quiserem e puderem nos juntarmos aqui, o fotógrafo vai ficar aqui e nós iremos ali embaixo, ok? Mais uma salva de palmas para essa manhã. Muito obrigada.